Here's the thing. Have you ever wondered where your motivation comes from? Well, here you go. What's up? We are back on the Entrepreneur Mindset series. If you like the content that we're putting out there for you every single week, do me a huge favor and subscribe, like, and share. Let's talk about motivation for a minute, okay? We can't do anything without motivation. Motivation is really like the engine that drives everything else, right? If you have a vision, you woke up one Saturday with, the ability to create this big, beautiful vision for your future, and you don't back it with motivation and drive, it's not gonna go anywhere, okay? So motivation, think of it as the fuel that pushes you through every single day, every single low that we get, and then it just gets stronger and stronger during the highs, right? Of that emotional roller coaster that we live as entrepreneurs. Now, where does it come from? How does it work? How do I, get more motivation into my motivation jar, and then I'm able to pull from that every time I feel like I'm having a shitty day and the results are just not there, right? How do we tap into that? Let's backtrack a little bit, okay? We have highs and then we have lows. As entrepreneurs, we come across challenges very, very early on. Sometimes we think that there's gotta be no outcome. We're just not gonna be able to figure it out. And all of a sudden something breaks and we have results. However, if you're not able to get to that point and you're not able to work for long enough to get to that point, nothing's gonna happen, and that's where motivation comes in. So how do we tap into motivation? Think about the dream that you have, all right? You have a picture in your head of where you wanna get to. You have a picture in your head which is backed by this emotional desire to do better, okay? Now, we have that, we have somewhat of a direction maybe where you want to head to. If you don't have direction yet, go back and create a vision of where you potentially want to be within the next 5 years, okay? That's going to be the foundation for everything else. So think of that as a roadmap, okay? Vision is a roadmap, motivation is the fuel that's going to get us there, and then we have the vehicle, which is whatever it is that we're doing. And wow, that's a really good analogy right there. I'm going to write that down. Now, with that being said, motivation it's the fuel again that just fires everything up in the morning. It makes us get out of bed when we don't feel like getting out of bed. However, what happens when it's running low and you just don't feel like waking up, and you don't feel like doing the thing and going through the motions of getting to that place that you want to get to, maybe because the vision isn't strong enough, right? So I think we've all, at this point, most of us have heard, okay, create a vision is gonna pull you towards a vision. Your actions are gonna be driven that way, and then it's just gonna carry you, and then you're gonna ride off into the sunset. Unfortunately, that's not true. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but it's really not. It's not that simple. If you create a vision, you keep telling yourself, okay, I'm gonna make $10 million. And then you can have, a picture, a drawing on every single wall of your house with $10 million on it. But if there's no emotional connection on the back of it, there's no motivation on the back of that, it's not gonna go anywhere, okay? So we have to craft not just the vision, but the motivation that's gonna get us there, okay? So how does that work? Again, how does the motivation factor kick in, and how does that impact everything that we do? There's two different types of motivation. First one is going to be extrinsic motivation, okay? External motivation. This is outside of you. And extrinsic motivation tends to be very superficial, okay? It tends to be very material and societal, meaning that it's usually about getting more things, getting more money, getting more cars, getting prestige and acceptance, and then moving on to that next level, right? So it's something that's outside of you. It's not motivation that's driven from within, okay? And again, this deals with the material realm. It deals with the societal realm and anything that's outside of you. The problem with only having extrinsic motivators is that they have an expiration. They either have an expiration date, or whenever you hit it, whenever you get to that goal or that source of motivation, your motivation dries out. Meaning, if your motivation right now is to make $1 million, okay, so you're waking up every morning, you have that fire, and then it's just like, yes, I'm gonna make $1 million, and then you're just thirsty and hungry for those $1 million. and then, you know, a year goes by, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, right? That particular piece of motivation carries you through the highs and the lows, right? Because you're fixated on getting that $1 million. However, when you hit it, What's next? If you create another goal that's the same, oh, I'm gonna make $5 million, it's not gonna mean the same. It's not gonna mean the same. Why? Because we have an innate need of self-fulfillment, right? So you've crushed the goal. And that's usually what happens to overachievers or high achievers, right? We set off to crush these goals that we have in mind. Once we hit them, like, okay, cool, what else do I do? And then you're just sitting there and wondering, okay, what comes beyond that? I wanted that car, I already got the car. I can get a nicer car, but I mean, is it really gonna make a difference? The answer is no. That's why you have, I mean, you see it all the time, right? You see it with people who've already made it, quote unquote made it. They're entrepreneurs. They've taken a very introspective look at themselves, and then they say, oh, you know what? Yeah, the Ferrari was fun for the first 3 months and whatnot. And then it wasn't, I mean, it was just a car. What happens there is that the motivation driver it changes, okay? So they were driven by external motivators, by that outside of them thing, okay? It's either materialistic or societal. That tends to be very superficial, and oftentimes it's just linked to material stuff or acceptance at a societal level, right? So we're looking for prestige, we're looking for money, again, houses, things that are outside of you. And it's a superficial type of motivation. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, all right? Psychologically, it can be one of the best things that happens to you, especially if you're bootstrapping a business and then you're striving to do better, right? Because why? We're driven by outside factors most of the time. Oh, you know what? I want to make more money. I want to look, better for the world, and I want people to see that I'm succeeding, and that there's a need for self-validation, and the power is coming from outside. It's not coming from within. And as that goes, it can be a very, very powerful tool to get you out of that survival state, okay? Because it's gonna wake your ass up in the morning with the desire to do better, the desire to strive. Why? Because you have a financial goal, you have a car goal, you have, something that you feel is gonna matter, right, to you. And it's gonna pull you through the through the low times where your motivation is just running dry. So it's not a bad thing, right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have external motivators. What I'm saying here is acknowledge them, be aware of them, and then use them as tools to get you to that next level. Okay, inevitably, external motivators run out. Okay, so that source of motivation has an expiration on it. Or once you achieve it, you're going to run out of motivation. Then you're just going to be sitting there trying to get motivated again with a different goal, a different thing that's outside of you. Now, the second type of motivation is intrinsic, internal, from within you. Okay, and this is a much deeper level of motivation. It's a deeper connection. It's a deeper connection to the self. It's a deeper connection to you, to your truth. And the interesting part of this is that it's really driven by purpose and contribution. Okay, this is where it gets a little complicated in terms of the existential beliefs that we have, right? Usually, by the time you get to the point where you're developing intrinsic motivators, you've already created something outside of you. So maybe you got out of survival mode, and then now you have a sustainable business, or you're fulfilled on the from a societal standpoint. Acceptance is there. I'm not saying the confidence is through the roof, but you're relatively stable with everything that's outside of you. Okay, meaning that you have some level of achievement and comfort in that way. Now, when you start to look internally, look inwards, and start searching, all right, for that truth, for that intrinsic motivation, it usually shows up in the sense of purpose, in the sense of something bigger. I want to make a change. I want to contribute. I want to create an impact. I want to make a dent in the world. And then your perspective starts to change, starts to shift. So all of a sudden, all the money in the world is not as important as it used to be before, right? Why? Because your priorities are shifting. Your motivation is shifting, and now you're taking an internal look at purpose, at contribution. You're outside of that survival stage, okay? You can't pour your heart into purpose and contribution if you're still stuck in survival mode, okay? Let's get that clear. It just doesn't happen, okay? You may want to, you may think about it, but you're not gonna be able to be fully vested until you get yourself out of survival mode. Now, once you're out of survival mode and into this other space where you're taking an introspective look at what you're doing, things change. okay? Now, purpose and contribution become really a priority, and you start focusing more on that. You start focusing on okay, what's my purpose? My particular purpose is to empower entrepreneurship. That's why I do everything I do. That's why I put out the videos. That's why I put myself out there, my opinions out there, because that matters to me more than the way that some people may look at me or may not. It's driven by purpose and contribution, okay? So it's an intrinsic motivator. It's coming from within me. It's coming from the self. Why? Because at that point, you get to understand you. You get to understand what your space in the world is, what space you want to play in, what your zone of genius is, and really how can you make that bigger, grander impact, right? If you have the ability to do so. And the beautiful thing about internal motivators or intrinsic motivators is that they never run out. You don't run out of that. You don't run out of helping people if that's what you're doing. You don't run out of making an impact if that's what you're doing. You don't run out of contribution. You simply evolve, okay? You're always giving back. And that may shift. It may start off as I want to help somebody, have a good, nice Thanksgiving dinner. And then that moves on into creating, communities in Haiti or something like that. And that evolves. Right? But it's coming from within. Now, next thing you know, yeah, your businesses are running at this point and you're still doing your thing, but what's really waking you up in the morning, it's that sense of responsibility, right? That sense of contribution, that sense of intrinsic motivation that's driving your actions. Now you're thinking bigger, you're thinking beyond, you're thinking, better and more impact and, or whatever that intrinsic motivation for you is. I keep going back to the same thing because that's really mine. That's what I focus on. I focus on impact, I focus on empowering entrepreneurship, and it really wakes me up in the morning. I mean, that's the reason why I'm able to do hours of content and put stuff out there together and not care if I'm rough around the edges, simply because I know that somebody's gonna get value from this and I'm gonna fulfill my purpose, right? Which is my intrinsic motivation. It's my intrinsic motivator. It keeps me awake, keeps me on my toes, keeps me driven. And I don't know if that's gonna change within 3 years. I don't know if it's gonna change or evolve, right? I know it's never gonna die out. There's always an intrinsic motivator happening. Why? Because that extrinsic stuff that I was looking for at some point ran its course. I took an introspective look at my truth, at who I really was, and now I'm looking for self-fulfillment, which is what it gives you, right? Intrinsic motivators give you a sense of self-fulfillment. And more importantly, they help you know yourself, okay? So when you know yourself, you can honor your truth. And you can honor your truth, meaning your being, through these actions that bring you self-fulfillment, okay? Driven by internal motivators. So yeah, it can be a little harder to figure out what your intrinsic motivators are because they are linked to your higher purpose, right? But once you have that, once you tap into that, understand this, it's not gonna die out. It's not gonna die out whenever you buy your next car. It doesn't mean that you can't buy nice cars or make millions. It doesn't mean, not at all. You can still continue doing all that stuff. However, your drivers, your motivate, all that becomes secondary. All that becomes a byproduct, okay? Why? Because your drivers are your primary motivators. And they keep you on your toes, they keep you fired up. They wake you up every single morning, even when you don't feel like waking up. You think back about that and then assume it as a responsibility, assume it as a way of life, and then build your habits around those intrinsic motivators. So next thing you know, you're an unstoppable machine. I don't care who you are, right? So it's doable. It's very doable. Stay focused. You got this.